Thank you all very much for attending. There's a lot of material here. I'm going to scream through a lot of it. However, if you've got any questions that are relevant that you're going to forget before the end of the session, ask. Otherwise, hold till the end of the session. 15 years of search and rescue experience is part of the reason I'm passionate about UAVs. I like mapping things. I like knowing where things are, and UAVs are also good for looking for people. I'm also a fixed-wing and rotor pilot. I have flown helicopters. I've flown fixed-wing aircraft. I get really irked when people put other objects in the way of my flight path. I don't like dying, so that also informs a lot of stuff. I work for Ernst & Young. I am incredibly fortunate to work for them because after doing incident response and computer forensics and cybersecurity for them for 3 years, they are actually letting me help lead our disruptive technology practice. I am doing UAVs for a Big Four firm, and I'm just incredibly fortunate in that regard. This is a kind of informative joke. There's a lot of perceptions about what UAV pilots do and don't do. My wife, when I started doing this stuff about 5 months ago, said, "You're going to make a living flying plastic toys?" And the answer is essentially yes. Why is this relevant? There's a lot of data out there on how big the UAV market is going to be over the next 5 years. It's all wrong. We don't know. It's just such a disruptive technology right now. It's such a hot market. VCs are dumping money into it. Vendors are popping up all over the place. We don't know. Some of the interesting things, though, are that we're most likely to create about 70,000 to 100,000 different jobs, 10,000 DJI Phantom quadcopters, which are the ones you usually see in the news, are being sold every week. That's a lot of UAVs showing up in the U.S. airspace and other airspaces. There's a lot of illegal and inappropriate activity going on with the UAVs. You've seen it in the news. They've landed on the White House lawn. They've delivered drugs and cell phones into prisons. They have been on the flight path at actually, I don't think it was DFW, it was Love Field. They've been seen over Newark. They have been crashing into crowds. I say all these things, and I want to make a really clear point. This is in the minority of all the pilots. The vast majority of the people flying UAVs are people like you and myself. They are flying safely and legally. This is a very, very small percentage of all the people out there flying UAVs. However, there are a lot of UAVs out there, and so that's still a significant percentage. So this is relevant for you all because law enforcement is going to be investigating these now. Regulations and law about UAVs are all over the map, and lacking FAA regulation that clearly says what you can and cannot do, a lot of local jurisdictions are passing their own laws, empowering local law enforcement to actually do something with these UAVs. If you're in law enforcement, it's relevant. If you're in agriculture, if you're in media, if you're in real estate, all these industries are going to be touched by UAVs. It will likely be relevant for you. There are a lot of anti-drone solutions out there. Most of them are illegal in this country. You cannot jam them. You can shoot them down with a shotgun in Northern California. Don't advise that because you can get charged for doing other things there, but you know, it's an option. There's a whole other side of the conversation about this. I want to make another thing really clear. I am not anti-drone in any way, shape, or form. I run a commercial UAV service company. I fly these things because I enjoy them. I've got a lot of friends who fly them. I am anti-stupid behavior. I'm anti-illegal behavior. If you put a UAV on my landing pattern, if you drop a UAV on my wife's head, I'm going to be very anti-you. I want to make sure that all the people that are investigating that sort of incident have the tools, the techniques, and the support they need to properly investigate that incident, whether it's in the defense of a pilot or to prosecute that pilot. We need to be able to gather accurate facts. We all need to be able to do this. That's why we're all here. That's what I'm here for. So quick terminology. UAS. There are RPAs, the military term. UAS is the more common sort of US term. It's an unmanned aerial system, emphasis on system, and we'll come back to that. The UAV is the aerial component, the aerial vehicle of that system. It's a vehicle. It's a vehicle for technology. It is not a disruptive technology unto itself. It's empowering other disruptive technologies. It's carrying sensors. It's carrying payloads. It's kind of like the NASA program. NASA empowered a lot of other things to happen, but it was not exactly the disruptive technology itself. Ground control stations, data links, drones, first-person view, all of these are relevant. I apologize for the bad joke, but a high-altitude view. DJI Phantoms, 10,000 a week. They are a very common platform. They're what most people will likely have to investigate. They also are a really good demonstration platform, and that's why I'm using it. It has all the components of every other system I fly and every other system that, even up to all the way to the military, it's got all those components. So what physical evidence is available? And I apologize for the red on black. I will redo this slide at some point. There's coffee, which is always important. There's the aircraft itself. The aircraft has a camera or some other payload sensor on it. There's a battery system. There's a radio controller. There's a Wi-Fi range extender. There's a mobile device, and there's a laptop. All of these are relevant to what we are doing. All of these have digital evidence on them. That aircraft has a embedded Linux system on it. That camera has another embedded Linux system on it. That Wi-Fi range extender has another Linux embedded system. Well, it's actually an OpenWRT, it's not embedded. The battery actually has an intelligent controller on it that you can talk to. That dumb radio controller, it's just a standard RC radio controller, actually has firmware on it that you can talk to. The laptop is used for maintenance, for billing, for all the rest of sort of the business operations, and that mobile device is my ground control station. The trailers in Nevada that they're using for flying Predators over Iraq is a big ground control station. That mobile device is my version of it. Even the commercial ones are oftentimes flying on Android tablets. It's a very common mechanism for ground control stations. What the physical evidence available is the drone itself with a flight controller, a sensor on it, physical evidence there. The ground control station, there's a data link component to that. There's a radio controller. There's a lot of post-processing technology available also. All these have digital artifacts. The mobile operating system, traditional operating systems, a variety of file systems, all that media storage, EEPROMs, and firmware. I started looking at JTAG. That's something I got to go learn a lot more about. It's probably relevant. I didn't get into that. There's also a lot of other pieces to this, and this starts getting into sort of commercial cybersecurity and commercial investigations. There's mission planning. It's still present just in my own one-person operation. There are maintenance logs, purchase records, social media, and fingerprints. All of these are relevant when you're investigating crash or other misuse of UAVs. What's on the UAV itself? The main board has a CPU on it, running Linux in most cases. There's a bunch of ESCs, electronic speed controllers, that also drive the LEDs. They drive the motors, battery board and battery. There's GPS and compass, which are used for flight control sensing. There's a flight controller with its own receiver tied to it, anti-interference board, and then the gimbal board drives the camera. So all of this sort of stuff may be relevant to your investigation. Keep it all in mind. The UAV CPU and operating system. The flight controller is essentially the CPU for a UAV. It runs some form of software on there. Think of that as the operating system. There's a lot of open source solutions, and I did this a couple months ago, and there are more solutions out there now, and there are a bunch of commercial solutions. There are essentially open source, well, it's not quite open source hardware, but you can buy a flight controller for about 18 bucks now. You can put that on all sorts of stuff that you build up yourself, and you're ready to go. Airware is a company out in Northern California. They are trying to be both the Microsoft and the IBM of the UAV world. They want to sell you hardware, the software that runs on it, and all the other components that tie into that. There's a lot of other people trying to do this as well, including open source efforts. Linux is the predominant operating system that I'm seeing out there on the UAV. All of the ground control stations, stuff like that, is traditional operating systems for the most part. Collection and analysis workflow. Most of us are digital forensicators in some form or another. This is highly relevant. You need to gather a lot of information before you get started on it. Look at all the pieces you've got, understand what they all are, understand how you're going to approach them all. Some of these systems can be highly customized. There's open source software out there, and a lot of the ground control station software that's used for mission planning and things like that is written by third parties, not by the vendors. Look at all those components. Determine the problem you're trying to solve. Are you doing an accident investigation? Is it because somebody used it for transporting illegal materials? Is it a privacy complaint? All of these will also help guide your investigation and what evidence you want to look at first and what evidence you want to look at later. These should be fairly familiar to everybody in the room. The guiding principles. Know what you're looking at. As I said earlier, it's a vehicle. You see a UAV, it's like, oh, okay, I'm going to pick this up, I'm good to go, I got everything. It's got a lot of other things inside of it. You've got to be prepared to go look at all those. Know how to talk to all these components. USB connections all over some of these things. The DJI Phantom, you can use Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. Other things use Mavlink. If you actually start pulling the things open, you may need to use JTAG and other forms of sort of deeper dive forensics. Know what it's running. Make sure you've got the tools to analyze what these things are running. Know what you're looking for. Most of the time you're looking for evidence of, was this thing used for illegal activity, where did it come from, where did it go? So you're looking for waypoints. You're looking for where it went to. But you may be looking for evidence of illegal payload. Was this used to drop something? Does it have some mechanism for lifting, grabbing, releasing, things like that? You also may want to say, hey, look, this thing flew 20 miles to get here, and you look at the battery, it's only been used for 10%. It's only been in the air for 5 minutes. There's no way it got here from wherever you thought it got to here from. Document everything. There's a form up on my blog site, which is a forensic collection form for these things. It walks you through all the steps for what you need to collect, how to collect it, things like that. If you've got changes that you want to see on it, let me know. Photograph everything. I always get a whole stack of index cards. I put the date, time, case number, all that. I put it down in front of each element of what I'm doing. I take a picture of it. That's my photographic record. Take a picture of the scene. Take a picture of the UAV as it was when you found it. Take a picture of the ground control station as you found it. All these things are relevant. If you're law enforcement, obviously fingerprint it. Mentally break all this stuff down into your component parts and make a plan for putting it all back together in terms of the forensic story you're trying to tell. Most of the rest of this presentation is I'm going to be trying to tell a story. We have a crashed drone or something, it's on the lawn and we don't know how it got there. We want to know the whole story of how it got here, why it was here, and we want to work it through the whole process. So I'm going to start us off with the crashed drone. It was found in the front yard. We want to know who owns it. We want to know how it got here, where it was before it was crashed. Was it going someplace else or was it coming here? And what was its purpose? So this is the underside of a DJI Phantom 2 Vision. It happens to be the underside of my DJI Phantom 2 Vision. On the upper part, upside down, I apologize, I label everything. So there's my user identified label on there. That's probably relevant. There's a model number on there. That's pretty useful. There's a serial number on there. That's really useful. I haven't done any law enforcement cases or civil cases where I've had a chance to file a subpoena against DJI. I would really like an opportunity to find out how they respond to such things. If anybody has a case involving DJI, please let me know. I'd love to help you. There's also another very interesting artifact. Underneath that QR code, there's a series of letters and numbers. Who can tell me what those are? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Come on. It's a MAC address. Why is there a MAC address on a UAV? Might it have a network on it? It has a network on it. That's relevant. By the way, if you look up that prefix, it comes back to DJI. That QR code is also rather interesting. That's what it expands out to. Right there in the string, it says it's made by DJI. It's a Phantom 2. Gives you the MAC address again. If you use that URL on your ground control station for the DJI, actually on the maintenance station, it will go off and update your firmware and do a lot of other things for you. Imagine what you could do, and I'm not recommending you do this because it's illegal. If you fuzz that address, What other information could you find out about the various people that are using their products? There's 3 Linux systems that are involved with the DJI Phantom. This is common to other platforms as well. The Wi-Fi range extender that's sitting on the back of the handheld radio controller has an IP address. It has a known root password. It's running OpenWRT. It's the connection point for the ground control station out to the Phantom. Ground control station talks to it. It talks to the Phantom. You now have a long-distance radio link out to your Phantom. You can replace that with any other WRT instance, which means that if you want longer range, you can do that. You can also use it to hack into these things, and I'll get to that later. The camera has its own IP address and root password. There's not a lot to look at there. And then the general purpose CPU on the Phantom is running another Linux system, and it remotely mounts, I think via NFS, that camera's file system. So that's where all the images come from. You can talk to that via SEER2net, and we'll get to that as well. The collection steps are in here. You basically SSH in, and you start using dump, pulls it back. I use Brian's live response tools to pull artifacts off of it as well. There are a bunch of gotchas about this file system and this operating system. First of all, there are 2 file systems on there. One's JFFS2, and the other one is sitting on top of an MTD device, which I had to go learn about. I do not know everything I wanted to know. Basically, dump the file system, then you got to byte swap it before you can do anything with it. It's JFFS. You got to go deal with that. And to actually put together the whole file system for that whole CPU, you got to layer it back on top of the other file system. All of these tools, all of the commercial tools, all of the sort of consumer-grade tools and many of the commercial tools have SDKs published for them. They want to encourage people to do cool things with these platforms. That means that you can do cool things with these platforms, such as getting at data they were not sharing already or not expecting to share. Be prepared to do your own development. This is what I did. I wanted to know where this UAV came from. One of the things I pulled back was the battery supply, remaining battery power, so they only used 21% of the battery capacity, been flying for about 8 minutes. But the most important thing is it had 6 satellites, 6 GPS satellites locked, and it tells me the home location. DJI and all the other vendors strongly recommend, and they even automate, having the UAV know where it was launched from. Because when you lose contact with it or something else happens, they want it to fly back to where it was launched from. If I find this thing sitting in my lawn and the power's still on it, and I can pull that information on, it's like, oh, plug that into Google, oh, he's about a quarter mile that way, let's go pick him up, or at least go talk to him. So very useful information. The DJI NASA flight controller doesn't have a lot of onboard data logging. When you power the thing off, a lot of the information goes away. Other flight controllers have a lot more onboard processing. Some of it sticks around, some of it doesn't. Just keep that in mind as you're looking at these platforms. The ground control stations have a lot more of that telemetry data, and that's really where you're trying to get to. Whoops, sorry. So the answer is often in the data. We've got this home location. We can walk over and find that home location. Let's go see what's over there. Actually, I'm getting ahead of myself, sorry. On this platform, there's also a sensor. In the case of the DJI, it's usually a camera, but I fly LiDAR for doing mapping purposes, standard optical, NVIR, actually NDVI, is for doing crop health, thermal for doing pipeline inspections, looking for missing persons, and you can fly a Wi-Fi range extender over there if you want to go use it to remotely hack into some building's Wi-Fi and extend their network out to where you are. The sensor data will tell you a lot about the purpose of that aircraft and where it's been. The most common optical sensors are the GoPros, the DJI-owned camera. I fly Canon S110s. A bunch of other people do that as well for more mapping purposes. The artifacts that come off these things are very traditional. These are all familiar to you. It's the image and the EXIF data. No rocket science here. The location of where this thing has been is right there on that UAV. Just pop the SD card out, and you've got it. This is the EXIF data from a Phantom Vision 2, as I said. It's got the GPS latitude and longitude right in there. It tells you where that picture was taken. Unfortunately, the DJI does not record altitude, so if you're trying to prove that this thing was flying into above 500 feet or something like that, you cannot do it with this data. You can then just take this and plot it. You now know every single place one of those pictures was taken. You can plot them in sequence. You know its entire flight path. I can now definitively say that this camera was over this location at this point in time. They could fudge the EXIF data, I admit. So you got to go look for that sort of evidence of tampering. There's a whole bunch of this sensor data that goes up in the cloud. The whole purpose of consumer drones is to make yourself look cool on YouTube, apparently. Other people do other things with it, but that seems to be where a lot of the evidence comes from. Check out YouTube videos, check out Facebook, check out all these other things. We already do this with mobile devices. We already are catching the bad guys, or at least saying, hey, look, stop doing this bad behavior, because people are posting this information. This is not anything new. Use your traditional techniques, you'll get a lot of results. The commercial vendors are doing the same thing. If I'm flying a UAV for 2 hours to go get crop health data, the farmer standing next to me wants to know right now how healthy his crops are. A lot of these things are uploading in real time to the cloud and doing processing, and by the time I land, they've got that data available for me. So keep all those in mind when you're doing your investigation. I did not stage these shots. Everybody who's flying these things wants to make sure their camera works, or they launch it, they leave the camera running, and if you pull the SD card out, you'll find these pictures. That is my license plate. You can go run my plate and find out where I came, where my car usually is, who I am, all that sort of stuff. That's a picture of me. I've looked at a lot of other people's imagery coming off their cameras. They got pictures of themselves when they're launching or landing it, right there. So now we got the launch point. What's at the launch point? There's a ground control station, which is often a mobile device, tablet, phone, something like that. There are a lot of vendor applications and third-party generated applications on that phone. The vendor applications are, I won't say well-written, and I'll give you an example of that in a minute, and the third-party applications, depending on who wrote them, range everywhere from very well-written to very poorly written in terms of security. A lot of information in there. What we're looking for are the default settings. How do they want to fly this thing? Where it was launched, when it was launched, owner's name, account information, all that sort of stuff. There's a bunch of other information that's at that launch point. If you pull my vehicle apart, you'll find 2 laptops, 3 UAVs, a whole bunch of batteries, all sorts of other evidence that may be of potential use to you. This is the standard DJI Phantom application. If you pull it apart, you've got a table in there, SQLite table, that's got a bunch of IDs, the flight time, latitude and longitude. The flight time is a little bit misleading and actually turns out to be the launch date of that. The latitude and longitude are correct. You plot those. You now know every place where I turned on that application and connected it to a DJI Phantom. You now know where I've been. Some of those locations I probably should not have been. And I moved that data around, so some of those places I definitely should not have been. I just made those up. The other thing off that ground control station, off that DJI Phantom application, is the path to this plist and my email account. The email account, like many other vendors, they're using that as my username. My password's in there for that website. That password's in the clear. You now have that information. This is the vendor's application. This is not some third-party developer who's just trying to put together something cool. This is the vendor doing this stuff. It also says I was running in ground control, the ground station mode, and I was not doing first-person view. With that account information, my own account, I don't have a subpoena, I don't need a subpoena, I can pull my shipping address, I can show how much I paid for it, a bunch of other information. People buy these things from Amazon and lots of other places. It's not always going to be this easy. Sometimes it is. So we went from the crashed UAV to where it was launched from. Now we're at home, or now we're at the office. What information is there? We have flight and maintenance logs. Did this person properly maintain their UAV? If you are flying commercially and FAA is voluntary compliance right now, if you are complying with them, there's a lot of stuff you need to do on a regular basis. That information should be there. They will likely have, in some form or another, a lot of information about previous flights. they will pull their imagery off from a flight they did 3 weeks ago. That information is there. They're going to have client and accounting data. This is all the traditional stuff that we will find when investigating somebody with a laptop that was used illegally. The UAV is just another example of a vehicle for illegal or malicious activity. You can investigate it in a similar manner. The data analysis system, initially people are doing a lot of the data crunching on their own platforms. It requires a lot of CPU and a lot of memory. Most of this is getting done in the cloud now. That said, most of us still pull the data off of our UAVs and store it locally, so that should be there. There are also a whole bunch of other UAVs sitting at home, spare parts and things like that. We have a drone in flight. It's hovering over you. Can we do anything about it? You can shoot it down with a shotgun. That's somewhat disruptive. It's somewhat illegal. Things like that. We would like to know who's flying it. We would like to know where it's going. We'd like to know what it's collecting. You can do real-time analysis on some of these platforms. Even this is illegal. I'm doing it against my own. How you use it, up to you. If you get into that OpenWRT system that's sitting on the back of the radio controller, you can now SSH out to the flight controller, and using search and net, you can talk to everything on there. Somebody else did all the work on this. I'm just reusing their material. They figured out some of the commands you can issue. You can ask it for a status. Most importantly, you can ask it where home is. So instead of having to develop that app that I did, I can just go talk to this thing in flight and say, where is your launch point? So it's hovering over me. It says, I came from over there. I walk over there. There's a guy holding a flight controller. That flight controller is paired to that Phantom. We're essentially good to go. You can hijack these things in real time. So I don't have to be standing next to the guy with the OpenWRT range extender. I can cause that DJI Phantom in flight to de-auth. I can have my own WRT range extender set up with a directional antenna. So I've got the strongest signal pointing out of that Phantom, and it will try to re-authenticate. It should re-authenticate to me. Now I've got the real-time connection to it. They still have the radio controller. They should be able to go land it themselves by taking control over it. My suspicion is that there's probably some way to send a command to that thing to tell it to even ignore the radio controller. I haven't gone that far yet. There is a tool out there called Skyjack that somebody wrote a couple years ago, designed for Parrot AR drones. It will hijack them. This sort of approach will likely work on a lot of other platforms. As I said, the Phantom's one of the more common platforms out there. It's actually the most common platform out there. These techniques apply to a lot of other platforms, and some of them are a lot easier. The Pixhawk flight controller is one of the more common flight controllers that are used in a lot of other platforms. It works with, most often it works with an open source package called Mission Planner, though 3DR is coming out with some custom applications, and a lot of other people are now talking to it more directly. It downloads a lot of data as it goes. To put together that map, I showed you of all the images earlier. It took me about an hour and a half. I had to go write some scripts, a bunch of other stuff. I can generate this plot of where that UAV was in about 2 minutes using Mission Planner. The data's right there, and it knows I want to plot it. Shows me altitude, location, all the rest of it, overlays on the top of a Google map. Much easier. This is a telemetry log of one of my flights of my fixed-wing UAV. Anybody in here a pilot? So what's pitch? Pitch. This is the record of the last 15 seconds of the pitch telemetry from a fixed-wing UAV prior to landing. I had it straight and level for a while. I was trying to get it lined up for my landing. It's looking at, I'm basically flying it, and then it's coming back towards me. I level everything out. We're good to go. We're just cruising right in. I'm about 10 feet off the ground. Life is good. All of a sudden, it pitches down horribly. And then it pitches right back up. I ran into a chain link fence. I was completely focused on the aircraft, and it's like completely missed this chain link fence, runs into it, pitches way down, hits the ground, bounces back up. It's now level. That's what that is. There's an enormous wealth of data in these aircraft. These things were, the original consumer UAVs were put together by a bunch of hackers who were flying radio control aircraft and said, hey, let's see if we can automate this stuff. To balance out the 4 props on a quadcopter takes a lot of computing power, and if everything's not quite right, they fall out of the sky. They've instrumented the heck out of these things. The data is in there. You can tell a lot about why things happen by looking at the data and knowing what you're looking at. You think this does not apply to a standard UAV investigation, but it might. Why did it crash in the lawn? Did they intentionally crash it there? Or did something in the system fail, which you can tell by looking at the logs, and it accidentally crashed there? It also records a lot of parameters, much easier to find. This is only a fraction of them. You can tell a lot about how it was configured. That tells you a lot about its purpose. I'm not going to get done early. I apologize. There are a lot of challenges and solutions going forward. The DJI Phantom's been around for a while. They've moved off the Wi-Fi. They're now going to Bluetooth. Other people are going to LTE, other cellular technology for controls. This closes down some opportunities and creates some other opportunities. And I'll give you something of a, if you can control a UAV via cell signal, how easy will it be for you to track that UAV back to the original pilot, the person flying it? And how long range can that be? If I'm getting all the telemetry back from that that says, okay, I'm now 20 miles that way, that's all I need to know to fly it. So the range of these things is phenomenal. And people have been hacking together long-range solutions, but as we go into cellular controls and things like that, it's going to get much longer range, much more capable. There are a lot of vendors doing their own thing. There are a lot of people doing custom work. There's a wide range of operating systems out there. There are a wide range of platforms. It's not just Windows, Linux, and what's the third vendor? Oh, wait, Apple. There's a lot of other things out there. Focus on the ground control station. The UAV's got a lot of cool stuff on it, but a lot of them, if you power it off, you lose a lot of the data. Some of it may require JTAG, and as I said, I've got to get into doing that. There is the sensor data on that platform. Pull that, look at it. But a lot of your information about what was going on, why it was going on, things like that, is on the ground control station. You do not need to do much different to go investigate those. They're running on mobile devices. We know how to investigate those. They're running off of laptops, running Linux, OS X, Windows. We know how to investigate those. There's no rocket science at that point. You all can go do this stuff right now. Some more forensic, mostly law enforcement approach things. The UAVs are paired with 2 different devices. They're paired with that wireless range extender or some other data link component, and they're paired with that radio controller. If you need to go to court and say, I know that this UAV, I believe with great degree of certainty that this UAV was operated by this person, and you can show that that UAV was paired with this flight controller, this radio controller that has my fingerprints on it, it's going to help you make your case. Use traditional processes. They should work for you. I just said you all can do this. You all can do it, but there's no one tool that's going to help you get the job done. This is not push-button forensics. You cannot plug the image into X-Ways or NCASE or anything else out there and get all of it done. To go analyze this one platform, and just this one platform, I had to deal with 3 different versions of Linux, 2 of which were unfamiliar to me. I had to go look at iOS and Android, which were relatively, I mean, I'm familiar with using them, but analyzing them was relatively new to me. OS X and Windows, one or the other usually. 6 different file systems at last count. I kind of did lose track. I'd seen JFS2 before because I was playing with some Android stuff. MTD was relatively new to me. Layering one on top of the other was completely new to me. I had to go figure that one out. Serial to net. This is serial to network. It's a very cool technology, but it was, again, very new to me. There's all sorts of data link stuff that needs to be dealt with. You got to pay attention to that. XF data I knew about. GPS I knew about. There's a lot of social media analysis you may need to do, and there are SDKs. I strongly recommend, if you need to get into this sort of stuff, do your research on the net, all this stuff, the bits and pieces of this are all out there. Some of it I had to go create myself, but a lot of it was based on research that other people are doing. Take your time, be methodical, work with people, talk to me, talk to each other, and together we can all go solve some of these complex solutions. UAVs do not exist in a vacuum. If you need to do or want to do UAV forensic analysis, you're still not existing in a platform, in a vacuum. There's a lot of cybersecurity issues that go around these things. These are unmanned aerial systems. If you want to plug these into your environment, be you a solo operator or be you a large commercial venture, please think about the larger cybersecurity issues. A lot of vendors are rushing these things to market. The cybersecurity controls in them are immature in many cases. That's a benefit to us as forensic investigators. It's not a benefit to anybody trying to use these things commercially. Think about the intellectual property and where that intellectual property resides. Again, that benefits you as a forensic investigator. The intellectual property in that case is, where's the data that's going to help me make a case? From a cybersecurity perspective is, where's the data that somebody's going to go try to steal from me? I believe a lot of that's in the imagery, and a lot of that imagery is up in the cloud. If that UAV is flying around over your crops or your mine site or whatever it happens to be, and relaying in real time that imagery to the cloud, where are the credentials for logging into the cloud? On the UAV. If somebody can hack into that UAV in flight, do you believe they can get your cloud credentials? Probably. If they can hijack your UAV, so hijacking your UAV may get them one snapshot of the data. If they can hijack your UAV and let you return it to home and you don't know it got modified, they now have essentially persistent access into the data you're collecting. Here's another point. Are we flying UAVs to collect imagery over things that we do not find valuable? What are we flying them over? We're flying them over new construction sites. We're flying them over test crops where we're trying to determine which one of these crops is most suitable to this environment. We're flying them over the racetrack where we're doing the test of our new Ferrari or whatever it happens to be. We're flying it over all these things that are of interest to us either as individuals or commercial entities. We are self-selecting that data, and we are uploading that all into cloud solutions. Some of those cloud solutions are really well designed, some of them aren't. But if I wanted to go find out about all of the critical infrastructure, gas pipelines, high transmission lines, and things like that, and the current health of them, and I know that this utility company is uploading their data to this particular cloud solution, am I going to go break into their facility and pull their maps? I can just go get the data they collected last week. And this applies to crops, it applies to all sorts of other things. If I want to go hack into Sony Pictures again, they're flying UAVs to collect, I mean, the UAV is a beautiful aerial platform for producing movies. It's one of the groundbreaking things for a lot of those things. Where are they storing that? I don't know the answer, but if somebody's interested, can go find that out. The final thing I want to make a point of is, again, UAVs are a vehicle. If you are involved in lawmaking in your local jurisdiction or national stage, if you're involved in policy, or you're just talking to people, let's keep something in mind. If I fly a UAV over your yard and take a picture, am I invading your privacy? Legally? No. Why should you pass a law against a UAV flying over your property? Is the UAV violating your property? Is making a law against that UAV flying over your property going to really fix a problem? We need to address the policy in terms of the risk, not in the technology that's demonstrating that risk. I can fly a helicopter over your property and take the same imagery, and if you wrote the law against, if you wrote the policy or law against the UAV, you haven't solved the problem. They are a vehicle. They may have all sorts of different payloads on it, Go solve the problem of the payload. Go solve the problem of the purpose. Go solve the problem of the societal issue that you're trying to raise. Don't write law or policy outlawing UAVs. Look at the larger problem. I think that, yep. This is me. You can reach me at my Gmail account. I'm also firstname.lastname@ey.com. I'm also on Twitter. I'm happy to help you all out with anything. I'm literally very interested in enabling other people. I'm not trying to make money off this thing. I'm trying to make sure that if you are working on UAVs in law enforcement and private practice, wherever, that you've got the right tools and technologies that you need to be successful. I'm also very interested in hearing from people who are running into these problems out there. I know in my heart, and I know from some private conversations, I know from some other sources, that some of this bad stuff's going on. But the more information we can share, and I'll keep it private or anonymous, however you want, the better off we all are in terms of this and a lot of the other things that we do. Any questions? Yes. DJI Phantoms run about $1,000, and that's fully capable. You can get a lot of other things for about $500. What you want is something that has the ability to fly autonomously and has some sort of sensor platform on it. DJI just happens to be very stable. 3DR also makes some really good stuff. Sir? We are the law and policy going that all the activity I see in that arena is based on fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and that is being fed by that very small percentage of people who are doing stupid things. They are flying over crowds. They're flying into the flight path of commercial airliners. They're flying multiple times into wildfires in Northern California and shutting down air ops. These things are happening, and the way that our political system and international political systems respond to these things is, let's just pass a law against it. The best we can do is try, we can do grassroots stuff, but the other thing we can do is try to get out there and influence that. I believe that there is some hope that the FAA will say that everything below 400 feet is essentially not no man's land, but consumers can fly in that airspace as long as they're flying safely, and they will not require a whole lot of regulation. I believe that commercial air operations will require a new type of certification, not a normal pilot's license, recurring training, things like that. I believe that the FAA is going to do the right thing. The question is whether local, state, and national privacy laws and things like that will be done right. I have doubts. I'm already seeing a lot of local laws that are badly written, unfortunately. It sucks for a couple reasons. It sucks because you just bought one and you want to go do it, but it's also really not helping the public think that the government's looking out for their best interests. And part of the problem is we don't have a lot of good data. We don't know. I mean, I know that the vast majority of people are flying safely, but we don't have data to support that. And the FAA has not put together any sort of process. We have this for commercial and general aviation. We have some idea of how many flights are executed, how many crashes, all that sort of stuff. We don't have any of that data for UAVs. We will get there, but we're going to get there because somebody's going to pass regulations requiring it, and those are going to be draconian rather than, hey, let's start with the easy stuff and then see what else we need to fold into it. So very good question, and for asking a really good question. Oh, sorry. Anything else? So the imagery is almost always saved on the UAV and transmitted either down to the ground control station or out to the cloud. That data link is not redundant by any stretch of imagination. That ground control station is not redundant. Most of these are designed to fail somewhat safe, so if they lose some piece of it, they're supposed to return to home and auto land. Yes. That's where that data came from earlier. And the challenge here is that they're making these SDKs available, and so all sorts of people running all sorts of applications. So there's a lot of information in there, but you got to go look at each application to figure out, hey, here's where the information may be. But exactly, and that's why I'm saying, you know, the UAV's got the EXIF data on there and things like that, but the wealthy information is going to be on those ground control stations because they want to monitor a lot of different variables for improving their product, and a lot of these things are written very poorly. So they're just collecting everything and storing it there. And that's, I believe I know they're on the phone in many cases, and I believe that for the data services, there's a good chance that they are on the UAV in an insecure manner. A lot of these things are embedded, and they don't have a lot, and so I can't change them, but the vendors have a challenge changing them because the DJI stuff has been out there for a couple of years. They still haven't changed it, so it's a real problem. I believe that I don't think there's a lot of hope on the consumer side of things. They want to get the cheapest possible product out there, you know, at the highest possible price point so they can make money off of it. I think in the commercial space, partly due to regulations, but also partly due to taking the knowledge that we all have about what good cybersecurity practices are for the enterprise and applying that to UAVs, that they're going to get there. All it's going to take is somebody hijacking, you know, some $30,000 UAV with a bunch of intellectual property on board for that sort of stuff to start getting out there. I've already been talking to some companies. They do get it. Whether the vendors are keeping up with them yet or not, we're seeing. There's an enormous amount of competition, and I don't think anybody's really prioritizing cybersecurity as being a way of differentiating themselves yet. They're more looked at endurance, reliability, payloads, and things like that. They'll get there. If they would start choosing some good existing technologies for like data links, that would help a lot. And so that's why going to cellular may help with some of those things. Anything else? Tom? It depends a lot. On the DJI, as far as I can tell, almost all the information goes away when you lose power. As you sort of move up in the ecosystem, there's a lot more retention because they're looking for fault tolerance. The DJI doesn't have a lot of onboard storage except for that SD card. The SD card is really, for the imagery, that SD card is really the persistence mechanism for that aircraft. In that particular case, that card's only wiped when you intentionally wipe it. It's a standard camera with an SD card in it, and that's why we can use standard techniques on it. With the Pixhawk flight controller, things are a little bit different. I'm still working on figuring out exactly what persists after we lose power on that. But a lot of that information, if all you've got is that UAV, your best bet's that imagery. If it's a standard DJI Phantom, you're not going to get a whole lot off of the powered down systems on there. As you move up that ecosystem, if you run into something, let me know, because I believe that there are going to be better persistence mechanisms. I got like 2 minutes. Anything else? Yay, I got 2 minutes extra. Cool. Thank you all very much for coming.